When Ebony stepped off the private jet, her gold ID badge shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. The man waiting on the runway froze. It was her father's most prized client, the one who could make or break his company. The man smiled warmly. Ebony Musa? The head of Skylink Ventures? Your father talks about you all the time. She laughed softly. Does he? Because just a month ago, that same father called her a failed daughter who would never amount to anything. He had no idea. The very deal he was desperate to close now belonged to her. Ebony walked into her father's birthday dinner with a small smile, holding a gift she had picked carefully. It had been a long time since she last sat at that table with her family, and she hoped maybe tonight things would be different. The dining room was filled with laughter and the smell of expensive food, but as soon as her father saw her, the air turned cold. He forced a half-smile, then went back to his conversation with Musa, her stepbrother, who was bragging about his new promotion at their father's company. Ebony sat quietly, waiting for a moment to speak, but every time she tried, Musa's loud voice covered hers. He showed off his new luxury watch and talked about his recent business trips, making sure everyone noticed. Her father laughed proudly, patting Musa's shoulder. When Ebony finally gathered the courage to share about her own work, saying she was building something meaningful, her father cut her off sharply. He looked straight at her and said in a cold tone, "You're still chasing dreams, Ebony. At your age, you should be stable, not pretending to be something you're not." The words hit her like a slap. Everyone went quiet for a moment, but then her stepmother forced a laugh to break the silence. Musa smirked, clearly enjoying her humiliation. Ebony's hands trembled slightly, but she tried to stay calm. She whispered, "I just wanted to share something I've been working on." Her father didn't even look at her. He poured himself another drink and said, "You're not built for success. You never were." The words echoed in her mind. The same man who once told her to dream big was now tearing her down in front of everyone. Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. She stood up slowly, placed the gift on the table, and said softly, "Happy birthday, Dad." Then she walked out. Outside, the night air felt heavy but freeing. Her heart was breaking, yet there was a quiet fire burning inside her. She had worked so hard to prove herself, and tonight's insult didn't crush her. It reminded her why she had left home in the first place. She knew one day he would see who she had truly become. As she drove away, the lights of the house faded behind her. Her face was calm, but her eyes told a different story. This was not the end. Something inside her had awakened. What her father and everyone at that dinner didn't know was that Ebony wasn't struggling at all. Behind the quiet, humble look she carried was a woman who had built something powerful. She was the chief operating officer of Skylink Ventures, one of the fastest-growing private aviation companies in Africa. The name Skylink didn't appear anywhere near her family's world, and that was on purpose. She had chosen to work under a discreet corporate name so that no one, especially her father, would connect her to it. Years ago, when she left home after one too many arguments, she had nothing but her late mother's small inheritance and a heart full of determination. Her father had refused to support her studies, saying she was wasting her time on dreams that would lead nowhere. He had laughed the day she told him she wanted to build something in aviation, saying, "You'll waste any opportunity you get." Those words stayed in her heart like a scar, but instead of letting them destroy her, she turned them into fuel. She studied hard, worked night shifts, and took small consulting jobs to pay her bills. When everyone thought she had failed and disappeared, she was actually building her own path brick by brick. It wasn't easy. There were nights she slept in her office, days she went hungry just to save for her next project meeting, and times when investors ignored her because she was young and female. But Ebony didn't give up. Her turning point came when she helped a small logistics company solve a flight coordination problem. That success got noticed by a foreign investor who saw her potential and asked her to join a new aviation startup. Within 5 years, she became the COO, leading hundreds of employees, managing major clients, and expanding Skylink's operations across Africa and Europe. Her staff respected her deeply, not just because of her intelligence, but because of her kindness and calm strength. She never bragged, never spoke about her past, and never mentioned her family. For her, silence was safety. She wanted to succeed on her own terms, not to prove anything to anyone, but to remind herself that she could. Every time she signed a new deal or stood beside an aircraft with her company's logo, she thought of her father's words. Instead of feeling angry, she smiled quietly. He had once told her she would waste any chance she got, but she hadn't wasted a thing. She had turned every wound, every rejection, and every insult into wings. And one day, she knew, those wings would fly right past the people who once doubted her. While Ebony was quietly running her growing company, her father's construction business was falling apart. For years, he had lived off his past success, spending more than he earned, and trusting the wrong people. Projects were delayed, debts were rising, and clients were pulling out one by one. Musa, who had just joined the company, made things worse by pretending to know more than he did. Together, they were desperate to find a way out before everything collapsed. Then came a ray of hope. A foreign billionaire named Mr. Darian Cole, famous for investing in African infrastructure. He was known for being sharp, charming, and very selective about who he worked with. If they could convince him to sign a partnership deal, their company could survive. Her father saw this as the golden chance to restore his reputation. He told everyone, "This one deal will change everything." Musa nodded eagerly, pretending he had it all under control. What neither of them knew was that Darian was not a stranger to Ebony. He was one of her biggest clients at Skylink Ventures. Ebony had personally handled his private jet logistics, his charter flights, and even his company's aviation operations. They shared mutual respect built over years of professional excellence. Whenever he traveled to Africa, he insisted that only Ebony's team managed his flights. To him, she wasn't just a business partner. She was a problem solver he trusted completely. When Darian mentioned he was flying to Lagos to finalize a construction partnership, Ebony smiled politely but didn't ask for details. She believed in keeping business confidential, even if curiosity tugged at her. She had no idea yet that the company he was meeting belonged to her father. On the other side, her father was preparing for the same meeting with excitement, not knowing that the venue chosen by Darian, the Skylink private terminal, was Ebony's world. The morning of the meeting, her father dressed in his best suit. Musa was busy rehearsing his pitch, trying to impress Darian with big words he barely understood. They drove to the terminal feeling confident, unaware that destiny had arranged something far greater than a business deal. Inside her office, Ebony reviewed the day's client list as usual. Her assistant mentioned that Mr. Darian Cole had scheduled a partnership meeting with new investors. She nodded, approving the details. But when she looked at the names of the guests, her hand froze. She whispered them again just to be sure. It was her father and Musa. A moment of silence passed before she slowly exhaled. Fate had brought them to her doorstep, not by chance but by perfect timing. The morning of the meeting began like any other for Ebony. She arrived early at the Skylink private terminal, her usual calm presence filling the room. She moved through the operations area, checking flight schedules, approving crew changes, and making sure everything ran smoothly for their high-profile clients. Her staff admired her professionalism. She was confident yet kind, the kind of leader who made everyone want to do better. Her assistant handed her the guest list for the day, and Ebony glanced over it. Mr. Darian Cole was arriving soon with potential partners. She nodded, already preparing for the routine welcome. But when she stepped out toward the runway, she noticed a black SUV pulling up near the hangar. Two men stepped out. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Even from a distance, she recognized the tall posture and the familiar walk. It was her father. And beside him was Musa, looking proud and overconfident as always. Her heart raced, not from fear but from disbelief. Of all the clients in the world, fate had chosen this moment to bring them to her. To her company, her ground, her success. Her staff, unaware of the family connection, rushed to welcome the guests of Mr. Cole. They treated her father and Musa with the same respect they gave all elite clients. Ebony stood still for a few seconds, watching the scene unfold. Musa adjusted his tie, grinning as he looked around the terminal, clearly impressed by the luxury of the place. Her father spoke proudly to the staff, pretending to be someone important. They had no idea that every detail around them, the planes, the staff, the polished floors, was all under Ebony's command. Ebony's assistant turned to her and asked quietly, "Ma'am, should we escort them to the conference room?" Ebony's lips curved into a calm smile. She could have stayed hidden, avoided the meeting, or sent someone else to represent her. But instead, she straightened her blazer, lifted her chin and said, "No, I'll meet them myself." She took a slow breath and began walking toward them, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Her team followed her gaze, not knowing they were about to witness a moment that would change everything. As she approached, Musa was busy talking when he looked up, and his smile froze. Her father turned too, and his face went pale. Ebony stopped a few steps away, her expression composed and professional. Fate had brought them to her doorstep, but now, it was her turn to decide how the story would go. Her father and Musa stood near the meeting room, admiring the place as if they owned it. They were speaking confidently, waiting for Mr. Darien to arrive, still unaware that everything around them, from the logo on the wall to the staff walking by, belonged to the same woman they once called a failure. Ebony stayed calm as she entered the room, clipboard in hand, ready to begin the meeting as usual. Her father barely looked her way, assuming she was just another employee. A few minutes later, Mr. Darien walked in with his usual cheerful energy. The staff stood respectfully as he approached Ebony first, smiling widely. "Ebony, my favorite partner in the skies," he said warmly, reaching out to shake her hand. The sound of her name in his voice made everyone pause. Her father slowly turned his head, confused. Musa's grin began to fade. Darien continued, speaking with pride. "Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the brilliant woman who's been running my aviation operations for the past 3 years. Without her, my projects would never run this smoothly." He looked at Ebony with genuine respect. "She's the powerhouse behind Skylink Ventures, the company providing all my aviation solutions." The room went completely silent. Her father blinked several times, as if trying to understand what he just heard. Musa's face went pale, his confidence melting away. The name Skylink Ventures hit them like lightning. It was the very company they had admired earlier, the one they had spoken about as if it were a dream to work with. And now, standing right in front of them, was Ebony, the woman behind it all. Her father's hands trembled slightly as he stared at her. His lips moved, but no words came out. He looked like someone who had just seen a ghost from his past, a ghost he once insulted and ignored. Musa looked down, avoiding her eyes completely. Ebony, however, stayed professional. She smiled politely, her voice calm and steady as she replied, "Thank you, Mr. Darien. It's always a pleasure working with you." She didn't look at her father or Musa. She didn't need to. The silence in the room spoke louder than any revenge could. Darien went on with business, praising Skylink's performance and future plans. Her father sat stiff, barely able to focus, while Ebony led the conversation with quiet grace. In that moment, the roles had completely changed. The daughter, once called a failure, now held all the power, and she didn't even need to remind them. Her success said it all. Ebony stood tall in front of them, calm and confident, while her father and Musa struggled to process what they had just heard. The room felt heavy, yet she showed no sign of discomfort. She turned toward her father and offered a polite handshake, her expression warm but distant. "It's good to see you again, sir," she said softly. Her father's mouth opened slightly as he stammered. You work here?" Ebony gave a small smile, her eyes steady. "Not exactly," she replied. "I run the company." The simple truth in her voice hit harder than any insult ever could. For years, he had called her a failure, and now she stood as the woman in charge of one of Africa's top aviation firms. Mr. Darien, completely unaware of the deep family tension, laughed proudly and said, "Your daughter is brilliant. She saved me millions in logistics this year. Her strategy changed everything for us." He looked at Ebony with admiration before turning to her father. "You must be very proud of her." Her father forced a shaky smile, nodding slightly, but his eyes revealed the storm inside him. Pride, shock, guilt, and regret all fought for space in his heart. Musa sat stiffly beside him, avoiding Ebony's gaze. His earlier confidence was gone, replaced with quiet embarrassment. Ebony continued the meeting as if nothing unusual had happened. She presented her slides, discussed routes, partnerships, and aviation expansions. Every word she spoke was sharp, clear, and confident. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was simply doing her job, but every sentence reminded them of how wrong they had been about her. Darien listened carefully, nodding in agreement, while her team took notes. The professionalism in her voice and the grace in her manner made it impossible not to respect her. When questions came up, she answered them calmly, giving solutions on the spot. She owned the room completely, not through power or pride, but through quiet strength. Her father sat there, realizing the woman in front of him wasn't the same daughter he once looked down on. This Ebony was independent, confident, and untouchable. He remembered the times he dismissed her dreams, the moments he told her she would never make it, and now he was sitting in her company, listening to her lead one of the biggest meetings of his career. When the presentation ended, Darian stood and applauded her success. Her father tried to smile, but the truth was too clear. The balance had shifted. The daughter he once doubted now stood above him, not in pride but in quiet triumph. When the meeting ended, everyone congratulated Ebony for another successful deal. Mr. Darian left with a big smile, thanking her again for her hard work. Her team began wrapping up documents, and the terminal slowly grew quiet. But as Ebony walked back toward her office, she noticed a figure waiting by the glass doors. It was her father. He stood there alone, looking smaller than she had ever seen him before. His shoulders, once proud and straight, now seemed heavy with regret. He didn't say anything at first. He just watched her approach, as if trying to find the right words. When she reached him, she stopped a few feet away. "You're still here?" she asked softly, her tone polite but distant. He swallowed hard, his voice shaky as he said, "I didn't know you were doing all this, Ebony." She met his eyes calmly, but there was no emotion in hers. "You didn't care to ask," she replied quietly. The truth in her words made him flinch. For years, he had never called to ask how she was doing, never tried to understand her dreams. The only time he mentioned her was to compare her to Musa or to criticize her for not being stable. Her father lowered his gaze. "I was wrong," he said slowly. "I thought you were lost, that you were wasting your life." Ebony's lips curved slightly, but it wasn't a smile. "You told me I would never succeed. You said I wasn't built for success," she reminded him. "I believed you for a while. But then I realized your words didn't define me, they only challenged me." He looked up, guilt written all over his face. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said. "I was just trying to push you toward something better." Ebony shook her head. "No, you were trying to make me someone I'm not. You wanted me to live your version of success, not mine." She sighed, her tone calm but firm. "I didn't build Skylink to prove you wrong. I built it to prove to myself that I could do it. Without your approval, without anyone's validation." Her father's eyes grew wet, but she didn't soften. The pain he caused had changed her forever. She had learned to live without his support, without his love. He reached out as if to touch her shoulder, but she stepped back slightly. "Ebony, I'm sorry," he whispered. She looked at him for a long moment and said, "I've already forgiven you. But forgiveness doesn't mean I've forgotten." Her voice was steady, her heart clear. "You taught me one thing. Never to depend on anyone to see my worth." Then she turned toward her office. Her father watched her walk away, realizing the daughter he once looked down on had become a woman who no longer needed his approval, only her own peace. A few days after the big meeting, Ebony was back in her routine, handling new clients and reviewing flight schedules. Everything at Skylink was running smoothly. But one afternoon, her assistant walked in with a concerned look and handed her a news report. The headline made her pause. Her father's company had lost its biggest contract. The same project that was supposed to save his business had completely fallen apart. The reason? Musa's poor planning and careless decisions. Ebony read every line quietly. The report said Musa had ignored safety checks, approved cheap materials, and missed important deadlines. The investors had pulled out immediately, including Mr. Darian's construction division. The irony wasn't lost on her. The very man who praised her at the meeting had unknowingly withdrawn from her father's company because of her stepbrother's mistakes. The deal that was meant to lift their name had now destroyed it. Within days, rumors spread across the business community. Her father's firm was drowning in debt, and clients were fleeing. Musa avoided the media and stayed silent, unable to face the humiliation. Ebony didn't feel joy or revenge, only a quiet sadness. Life had a strange way of teaching lessons, and this one was harsh. One evening, as she prepared to leave the office, her phone rang. The screen showed a name she hadn't seen in years, Dad. For a few seconds she thought about ignoring it, but then she answered. His voice on the other end was soft, almost broken. "Ebony," he said. "I'm not calling for money. I want to understand. How did you do it? How did you become this strong?" His tone was different this time. There was no pride, no ego, only regret. Ebony stayed silent for a while before replying. "Maybe because I had no choice." There was a pause, and then she added gently, "If you really want to know, we can meet, but only if you're ready to listen." He agreed immediately. He didn't ask for help with the company, didn't beg her to fix anything. He only wanted to understand what gave her the strength he never had. Ebony ended the call quietly, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of her wanted to keep her distance, but another part knew that maybe this was the moment she had been waiting for. Not revenge, but closure. That night, as she looked out from her office window at the glowing city below, she whispered to herself, "Everything comes full circle." For the first time, she didn't feel anger, just peace. Fate had done what words never could. They met at a small, quiet cafe by the lake, the kind of place where conversations felt honest and calm. Ebony arrived first, wearing a simple white blouse, nothing fancy, just herself. When her father walked in, he looked older than she remembered, his shoulders lower, his confidence gone. He greeted her softly, almost afraid she might walk away. But she didn't. She nodded, and they sat down across from each other. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence carried years of pain, misunderstanding, and words left unsaid. Finally, her father took a deep breath and said, "I don't even know where to start." Ebony looked at him and replied quietly, "Then let me start." She told him everything she had never said. How she used to stay awake at night crying after he called her a disappointment, how she worked double shifts to afford flight school, and how her mother sold her jewelry just to help her buy her first laptop. She explained how many doors closed in her face, how many people laughed when she talked about starting an airline company. But she didn't stop. She worked harder every day, learning, saving, and believing in herself even when no one else did. Her father's hands trembled as he listened. His eyes slowly filled with tears, but he didn't interrupt. For once he let her speak, really speak. Ebony continued, telling him how she built Skylink piece by piece, starting from one small cargo plane to an entire fleet. She told him about her first office, which was nothing more than a rented desk in a noisy co-working space, and how she used rejection letters as motivation to push further. When she paused, her father looked down ashamed. "I thought I was helping you by being hard on you," he whispered. "I thought success only came from pressure. But I was wrong." His voice broke as he admitted, "I was too proud to see how strong you already were." Tears slipped down his face as he finally said the words Ebony never thought she'd hear. "You didn't fail me, Ebony," he said softly, his voice shaking. "I failed you." Ebony sat quietly, her eyes glistening. For the first time, his words didn't bring pain, they brought peace. It wasn't about forgiveness or revenge anymore. It was about understanding. She looked at him, smiled faintly, and said, "I never wanted to win against you, Dad. I just wanted you to see me." And in that quiet cafe, for the first time in her life, he truly did. Months later, life looked completely different for Ebony. Skylink Ventures had become Africa's leading private aviation firm, known for its honesty, innovation, and strength. Reporters spoke her name with respect, and young entrepreneurs looked up to her as a symbol of perseverance. On the night of the company's first grand gala, the ballroom sparkled with golden lights, and banners of Skylink shimmered behind the stage. The air buzzed with admiration, but for Ebony, it wasn't about fame, it was about peace. She stood backstage, calm and graceful in a navy blue gown, ready to receive the Transformational Leadership Award. Mr. Darien, smiling proudly, offered her a gentle nod before calling her name. The applause was thunderous as she walked to the podium. But in that sea of faces, her eyes found one that made her pause. Her father sitting quietly in the audience. He looked smaller somehow, humbled, but his eyes carried pride and deep emotion. When she reached the stage, Darien handed her the Glass Award. "To the woman who redefined leadership with heart," he said. She smiled, took a deep breath, and stepped forward to speak. The room fell silent, every camera flashing, every ear waiting for her words. She looked at the crowd, but her voice was soft and full of feeling. "Some journeys," she began, "start at the moment when love ends. When people you trust stop believing in you, and you have to believe in yourself instead. That's when real strength is born. Her father's eyes glistened as she continued, her tone calm yet powerful. If you keep walking, even when the road is lonely, even when you're told you can't, you'll find yourself again, higher than anyone ever imagined. The entire room stood in applause. People wiped tears from their eyes, moved by the sincerity in her words. For Ebony, it wasn't just an award. It was a closure. The final chapter of a painful journey turned into purpose. As she stepped off the stage, she caught her father's gaze once more. He rose to his feet and clapped quietly, his smile trembling. In that moment, she didn't see the man who once doubted her. She saw a father trying to make peace, trying to love better, even if it was late. Outside, through the glass windows, a jet lifted into the night sky, its lights gliding across the clouds. Ebony looked up, a soft smile forming on her lips. That sound, steady and free, wasn't just an airplane taking off. It was her own soul soaring.